Have you ever wondered what America's working class families really ate before fast food took over every corner? Meals that weren't just about flavor, but about pride, struggle, and survival. Dinners born from native soil, factory shifts, and the hands of mothers who could turn almost nothing into comfort. Today we're opening the kitchen door to rediscover 30 forgotten dinners from the 1970s that fed a nation's soul. Stay till the end, because one of them might just taste like your own family's story. If you love rediscovering lost pieces of American food history, hit like and subscribe, and let's bring these flavors back to life together. 1. Corn pudding. Close your eyes and imagine a farmhouse kitchen in the heart of the Midwest during the 1970s. The smell of butter melting in a cast iron pan mingles with the sweetness of golden corn fresh from the field. This was corn pudding, a dish so simple, yet so sacred, it connected generations back to the earliest native harvests. Long before canned goods and instant mixes, corn was life itself. It was the heart of the three sisters, the holy trinity of corn, beans, and squash that sustained tribes for centuries. Each spoonful carried the story of survival farmers rising before dawn to husk ears grown on land their grandparents once tended. Eggs, milk, and a touch of sugar turned the kernels into a warm, custard-like comfort that graced every Sunday table. The pudding shimmered golden beneath a crust kissed by the oven's heat, a humble reminder that the simplest ingredients often carried the deepest meaning. But as boxed cornbread and microwavable sides took over the shelves, this soft, creamy treasure slipped quietly into memory. Still, for those who once waited by the oven to hear that gentle, bubbling sound, corn pudding will always taste like home, the flavor of gratitude, hard work, and harvest. 2. Fried chicken with cornbread and collard greens. Picture a Sunday afternoon in the rural South, the air thick with the scent of sizzling chicken and cornbread baking in a heavy skillet. This was more than dinner. It was a gathering, a quiet ceremony of family and faith. The golden crust of the chicken crackled under the fork, its secret resting in cast iron pans seasoned by generations. Beside it, cornbread, sweet, crumbly, kissed with honey, waited to soak up the savory juices, while a pot of collard greens simmered slowly on the back burner, rich with smoked pork and memories. These foods told the story of two Americas meeting at the same table, native crops like corn and greens blending with African culinary spirit and European frying traditions. Together, they created something deeply American comfort, born from resilience. But as fast food chains spread across highways and families spent less time around the dinner table, the slow ritual of frying, baking, and stirring faded. Yet somewhere in small southern towns, the sound of oil popping and the smell of cornbread rising still whisper a truth we shouldn't forget: the best meals aren't rushed, they're shared. If you're enjoying this trip through time, hit like and subscribe for more stories from America's forgotten kitchens. 3. Black-eyed peas and collard greens. In the deep South of the 1930s, when hard times tested every family, black-eyed peas and collard greens weren't just food, they were hope on a plate. The peas, earthy and humble, simmered all day in a pot beside tender greens that soaked up the smoky flavor of salted pork. Together they formed a meal that fed both body and spirit, born from the soil and sustained by community. Though often called poor man's food, this dish was sacred in its simplicity. The black-eyed peas came from African roots, the greens from native fields, and both became the backbone of survival for generations who refused to give up. On New Year's Day, families still say eating them brings luck and prosperity, a whisper from the past reminding us that blessings grow from the ground. But in today's rush of takeout boxes and drive-through dinners, few still wait for that slow simmer. And yet those who remember the sound of a bubbling pot and the warmth of a crowded kitchen know this wasn't just a meal, it was a promise that even in lean times, love would find a way to feed us all. 4. Wild rice and mushroom casserole. Far north of the cornfields, where lakes glimmered like mirrors, the Ojibwe people harvested Manoomin wild rice that grew tall and soft on the water's edge. By the 1970s, this ancient grain had found its way into everyday American casseroles, often baked with buttercream and earthy mushrooms. But its roots went far deeper than any recipe card could tell. Wild rice wasn't just food. It was heritage. Harvested by canoe and dried under the autumn sun, every grain carried the rhythm of paddles, songs, and smoke from birchwood fires. In modern kitchens, families mixed it with mushrooms and onions, turning it into a dish that felt both elegant and ancient. The nutty aroma filled the house, bridging centuries in a single meal. When convenience rice and box mixes arrived, this slow ritual disappeared. Few still remember the quiet pride of cooking, what nature gave, not what factories boxed. Yet the memory lingers in each chewy bite, flavors of lake winds, cedar smoke, and the patience of those who lived in harmony with the land. 5. Turkey and gravy with mashed turnips. Before the shiny supermarket turkeys of today, families once gathered around birds. They'd raise themselves slow roasted till the skin turned bronze and the air filled with warmth. Alongside it came mashed turnips, pale and peppery, born from cold earth and long winters. This meal was simple, yes, but it tasted of gratitude. Long before Thanksgiving became a holiday of abundance, native and settler communities shared turkeys and roots to celebrate survival through another season. Turnips, easy to store and rich in minerals, were a lifeline when the harvest ran thin. The gravy, dark, savory, made from pan drippings, was the glue that tied everything together. As instant mixes and pre-cooked meals replaced tradition, the slow joy of basting and mashing faded away. Yet, for those who still recall the scrape of the masher and the smell of butter melting into warm roots, this dinner remains more than nostalgia. It's a quiet act of remembering where our food once came from. 6. Spanish rice with tomatoes and green peppers. Down in the sun-baked kitchens of the Southwest, Spanish rice simmered in heavy pots while children played in the yard. The scent of garlic, peppers, and tomatoes filled the air, bright, spicy, alive. Though it carried a Spanish name, its soul was pure, native, corn-fed soil, hand-planted peppers and rice that told the story of survival along desert rivers. Each grain soaked up the deep red sauce, creating a humble masterpiece that graced both working tables and Sunday feasts. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, an echo of the fusion between Spanish settlers and Pueblo Apache and Navajo foodways that shaped the region. Today, fast-cooked rice bags can't capture that same earthy magic. Yet for anyone who's stirred the pot wooden spoon in hand, you know it's more than a recipe, it's heritage passed through flavor. If these forgotten flavors bring back memories of family kitchens and slow evenings, your comments keep these stories alive. Drop yours below. 7. Stuffed bell peppers. Imagine walking into a 1960s kitchen, the smell of roasted peppers and stewed tomatoes wrapping around you like a warm hug. Stuffed bell peppers were once the pride of every home cook, a rainbow of red, yellow, and green shells filled with seasoned ground beef, rice, and onions. They bubbled away in Pyrex dishes under the hum of kitchen fans, the scent drifting down quiet suburban streets. But these peppers carried more than flavor. They carried memory. They told of backyard gardens where families grew their own produce, of mothers stretching meat with rice to feed 5 hungry mouths, and of laughter echoing from Formica tables. It was a meal that demanded patience, hollowing, stuffing, baking, not because it was fancy, but because it mattered. When frozen dinners and microwave trays took over, this simple ritual faded. Yet for anyone who sliced into that tender pepper and watched the steam curl into the air, you know, some meals feed more than hunger, they feed belonging. 8. Hamburger hash. Before one-pan dinners were a trend, there was hamburger hash, the quiet hero of the working man's kitchen. Ground beef, diced potatoes, and onions met in a cast-iron skillet, sizzling their way into something both modest and perfect. The smell was unmistakable, a blend of brown meat, salt, and comfort. Born from necessity during hard times, this dish turned leftovers into survival. Families who couldn't afford roasts or steaks found warmth in these humble ingredients. Each bite carried the taste of grit and gratitude, the kind of meal that didn't need silverware or ceremony, just hunger and love. As convenience culture rose, hamburger hash vanished, replaced by frozen patties and drive-through burgers. But in every family that still keeps an old skillet, seasoned with stories, the memory endures. It reminds us that the most honest meals are the ones cooked with what we have and shared with who we love. 9. Porcupine meatballs. No porcupines were harmed in this dish's creation, only a mother's ingenuity at work. Porcupine meatballs got their name from the rice grains poking through tender beef after simmering in tomato sauce. It was a Depression-era miracle, 1 pound of meat stretched to feed an entire family. The scent of tomatoes and garlic filled the air while rice slowly softened inside the meatballs, creating the perfect stick-to-your-ribs dinner. For many, this was a reminder that hard times could still yield comfort. It wasn't glamorous, but it was love made edible. By the 1980s, pre-made frozen meatballs and instant pasta took over, and the handmade versions disappeared. But for those who remember standing by the stove watching the sauce bubble and tasting the first forkful, it was never just food, it was pride. It was proof that even when money ran thin, creativity and care could still make something beautiful. 10. Lentil and kale stew. Long before superfoods filled glossy magazines, lentil and kale stew kept working families alive through brutal winters. Thick, earthy, and full of nutrients, the stew simmered on wood stoves for hours, an unspoken promise that there'd be warmth at day's end. The lentils, small but mighty, came from the same fields that fed livestock and families alike. Kale, hardy enough to survive frost, added both color and strength to the pot. Together they created a meal that healed. People believed it could chase away sickness and sorrow alike. As canned soups and electric appliances took over, this slow ritual faded. But close your eyes and you can still hear the ladle clink against the pot, smell the mingling of herbs and smoke, and taste a time when food was medicine. If you're enjoying this journey back through America's forgotten kitchens, hit like and subscribe to keep these flavors and their stories alive. 11. Braised celery and potatoes. During the Dust Bowl years, when every scrap of land was precious, celery and potatoes grew in victory gardens behind homes and barns. Families learned to survive on what their soil would give, and this dish was their quiet triumph. Potatoes offered strength, celery, freshness, and together they became a humble comfort. The vegetables simmered slowly in broth and butter, filling tiny kitchens with warmth even when the pantry was bare. Neighbors often shared what little they had, trading a handful of celery for a jar of potatoes, a kind of community currency born from need. It may sound plain now, but back then it was a feast of gratitude. Each spoonful carried the taste of endurance proof that simplicity could still bring joy. Today, in a world of excess, it's worth remembering that the best meals often came from the hardest times. The people who made them didn't waste. They honored every bite. 12. Cabbage potatoes and smoked sausage bake. This dish was the backbone of blue-collar kitchens across the Midwest. Layers of cabbage potatoes and smoky sausage, baked until tender in a tangy mustard cream sauce. It was the kind of meal that filled the stomach and warmed the heart after long shifts at the mill or factory. Cabbage lasted through winter, potatoes were cheap, and sausage brought salt and comfort. Together they told the story of families who made much out of little. The bubbling casserole wasn't just food, it was a thank you after a day of hard labor eaten with laughter and tired hands around the table. But as low-carb fads and prepackaged meals swept in, this slow-baked classic vanished. Still, the memory lives on in handwritten recipe cards, stained with butter and thyme. One bite of smoky, creamy goodness, and you can almost hear the clatter of dinner plates and the steady hum of a life built on honest work. 13. Pot roast. There was a time when Sunday didn't feel complete without the slow hum of a pot roast cooking all afternoon. In farmhouses and city kitchens alike, this was the meal that called everyone home. A tough cut of beef chuck brisket or round was browned in a heavy Dutch oven, then left to simmer for hours with carrots, onions, and potatoes until it transformed into tender perfection. The smell filled every corner of the house, a quiet signal that rest had finally come after a long week. For working families, pot roast wasn't just dinner, it was reward. The beauty of it lay in patience. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted, just time and care turning the ordinary into comfort. As microwaves replaced ovens and Sundays turned into just another busy day, the art of slow cooking faded. But those who remember scraping gravy from the bottom of the pot know this truth: some flavors can't be rushed. They belong to the rhythm of family of stories told over steaming plates. 14. Chicken fricassee. Before pre-cut chicken and instant sauces, there was fricassee, a dish that celebrated the whole bird and the art of taking one's time. It began with the hiss of butter in a pan, the soft sizzle of chicken pieces browning just enough to turn golden, then the slow swirl of cream and broth blending into something tender and rich. This recipe crossed oceans from Europe but found a new heart in America's rural kitchens where no piece of food went to waste. It was the perfect balance, rustic yet elegant, resourceful yet indulgent. Served over rice or dumplings, it fed large families with warmth that lingered long after the plates were cleared. When boneless chicken breasts and packaged sauces took over, the fricassee faded from memory. Yet its spirit lives on wherever cooks still use both hands and heart. In every silky spoonful lies a lesson: simplicity and care will always taste better than speed. 15. Lamb stew with vegetables. In the chill of early spring, when snow still clung to fences, lamb stew filled American kitchens with hope. Tender pieces of lamb simmered slowly with potatoes, carrots, and peas in a broth so rich it seemed to hum with life. Each bubble in the pot marked another moment of patience, another hour closer to comfort. Once considered a dish of hospitality, lamb stew often appeared at church suppers and neighborhood potlucks. It carried the warmth of community, every bowl a shared story of generosity and endurance. Even children who wrinkled their noses at vegetables couldn't resist the smell of herbs and roasted meat drifting from the stove. By the 1980s, cheaper meats and faster meals pushed it aside. But if you've ever dipped a piece of crusty bread into that hearty broth, you know it's more than dinner. It's the taste of coming in from the cold, of belonging somewhere warm. 16. Hungarian goulash, American style. Few dishes can wrap you in nostalgia the way a good goulash can. Thick with beef, onions, and paprika, this Hungarian classic found a second home in American kitchens, especially through the 1950s and 70s. It was rich, filling, and slightly exotic, a taste of the old world simmered with Midwestern practicality. Mothers called it one-pot magic. The stew bubbled for hours, the sauce deepening into a smoky red comfort that begged for noodles or bread to soak it up. Families gathered around chipped enamel bowls, laughing between mouthfuls that warmed even the coldest days. When frozen dinners and canned pasta appeared, the goulash pot went quiet. Yet nothing compares to the sight of steam rising from a pot of slow-simmered meat and paprika. It was, and still is, a humble reminder that every culture that came to America left something beautiful in its kitchen. 17. Smothered pork chops with onion gravy. If comfort had a scent, it would be smothered pork chops on a Sunday afternoon. The pork browned in a cast iron pan, bathed in thick onion gravy until it turned fork tender. The aroma wrapped the whole house, salty, peppery, and rich with love. This was Southern cooking at its most honest. It didn't demand fine ingredients, just time and care. Served with mashed potatoes or warm biscuits, it was a meal that said, "You made it through another week." The onions caramelized to sweetness, blending with drippings to make a sauce that hugged every bite. Over time, powdered gravies and boneless cuts replaced the ritual. But for those who remember scraping every last drop from the skillet, it remains a sacred flavor, one that carried pride, patience, and a promise of better days. 18. Chipotle beef ragu. Before fusion cuisine had a name, there was chipotle beef ragu, a slow-cooked blend of Mexican spice and American heartiness. Beef chuck simmered for hours with tomatoes, garlic, and smoky chipotle peppers until the sauce turned deep and bold. This dish told the story of migration and mingling cultures in the Southwest, where flavors crossed borders long before politics did. Served over cornmeal, mush, rice, or even noodles, it brought warmth to any table and left mouths tingling with just the right heat. As time passed, slow-cooked meals gave way to quick fixes, and the soul of dishes like this faded into memory. But that smoky aroma, the one that clung to your clothes and made neighbors jealous, still speaks of patience, heritage, and fire. It's more than dinner. It's a love letter to the land and the people who worked it. 19. Scalloped potatoes and ham. Picture a farmhouse kitchen in the early spring, the scent of creamy potatoes and smoky ham floating through the air. Scalloped potatoes and ham were a post-harvest celebration, a way to use leftovers and stretch every bit of goodness the land had given. Thin slices of potatoes layered with butter, milk, and bits of ham baked slowly until a golden crust formed on top, bubbling at the edges. It wasn't luxury, it was gratitude. Families who'd worked the fields all week sat down to a meal that was humble but rich in comfort. The crisp edges, the tender center, the hint of salt from the ham, every bite carried the warmth of home. It was proof that a few ingredients, when treated with care, could feed both body and soul. By the 1980s, instant potato boxes replaced this slow, loving ritual. But those who've ever scraped the brown corners from a casserole dish know that flavor can't be replicated. It's the taste of patience and of a time when food meant family. 20. Green bean almondine. There was a quiet elegance and simplicity, and green bean almondine was proof. In the 1960s and 70s, this side dish graced countless dinner tables. Fresh green beans, sautéed in butter, finished with toasted almonds that crackled softly under each bite. It was the working family's version of sophistication, affordable, wholesome, and beautiful on a plate. Housewives took pride in serving it beside roasts and casseroles, a little touch of refinement that spoke volumes about effort and care. The bright green of the beans and the golden almonds mirrored America's optimism, simple things done well. As canned soups and processed casseroles swept kitchens, this gentle dish disappeared. Yet the memory lingers in the clatter of pans and the soft hiss of butter melting on the stove. Green bean almondine reminded us that elegance doesn't come from excess, it comes from intention. 21. Cheddar broccoli rice baked nothing, said home in the 1970s, quite like the smell of cheddar broccoli rice baked bubbling in the oven. A scoop of this dish, creamy, cheesy, dotted with green florets, could quiet even the loudest dinner table. It was comfort disguised as convenience. Broccoli brought color and nutrition, rice made it hearty, and cheese tied everything together in one golden molten layer. For working families, it was magic, affordable filling, and loved by kids who wouldn't touch plain vegetables. The dish borrowed from native sensibility too, using every grain, every crop, making nothing go to waste. As microwaves and ready-made meals took over the ritual of baking, this casserole disappeared. But that bubbling sound, the smell of cheddar and butter filling the air remains etched in memory. One spoonful, and suddenly you're back in your childhood kitchen waiting for dinner to be called. 22. Vegetable pot pie with biscuit crust. Born in the hardest of times, vegetable pot pie wasn't just food. It was survival shared among neighbors. Imagine the Dust Bowl years, parched land, thin harvests, yet somehow kitchens still smelled of stew and biscuits. Families pooled what they had: carrots, onions, cabbage, a little butter, and baked it under a flaky crust made from flour they could barely spare. It became more than a meal. It was a symbol of togetherness. Each bubbling pot told a story of community strength, of laughter, traded for ingredients, of people who refused to let hardship break their spirit. The aroma of baked dough and herbs lifted more than hunger, it lifted hearts. Modern comfort foods may come frozen, but nothing can replace that old spirit of sharing. Each bite of a homemade pot pie is a taste of resilience, the kind that once held entire towns together. 23. Sweet potato and turkey gratin. After every holiday feast came creativity. Leftover turkey slices of sweet potato and a creamy sauce baked into one indulgent dish, the sweet potato and turkey gratin. Golden on top, soft beneath it, turned scraps into luxury. This recipe carried echoes of native ingenuity, blending root crops with lean meat in perfect balance. Sweet potatoes, once considered sacred gifts of the earth, lent their caramel sweetness to the savory depth of turkey. Layered together, they told a story of abundance earned through gratitude. As modern life grew, hurried, careful layering gave way to shortcuts. But anyone who's ever pulled this dish from the oven knows the reward of patience. The moment the crust cracks beneath your fork and steam rises, you're reminded this is what love used to taste like. 24. Macaroni and cheese with stewed tomatoes. Before it came in blue boxes, macaroni and cheese was made slowly, with care, and real cheddar stirred into a pot. But in many homes, a twist was added. Stewed tomatoes poured on top. The tang of tomato met the creamy richness of cheese in a balance that made the dish unforgettable. This version had its roots in rural America, where canning was a yearly ritual. When gardens overflowed with tomatoes, families preserved them to last the winter. Those jars found their way into countless dinners, turning simple macaroni into something special. Today we've forgotten the harmony between garden and table. But for anyone who remembers the sound of a spoon scraping the pot, the smell of cheese melting under a tomato glaze, it wasn't just dinner. It was the taste of summer preserved in glass, brought back to life in winter warmth. 25. Split pea soup with vegetables. When the wind howled outside and the fields lay bare, split pea soup was the quiet hero of winter. Thick, hearty, and packed with humble vegetables, it filled kitchens with the kind of warmth that only slow cooking can give. Green peas soaked overnight, simmered with onions, carrots, and bits of ham bone, stretching simple ingredients into a feast that could last for days. Its roots ran deep through American kitchens, echoing traditions from native and settler cooking alike. For many families, it was a symbol of thrift and gratitude, proof that nothing needed to go to waste. The bubbling pot was a comfort soundtrack to hard seasons, when a hot bowl by the fire meant everything. As canned soups took over the shelves, the slow ritual faded. Yet those who remember ladling this thick green goodness into chip bowls know it wasn't just food. It was care served by the spoonful and the sound of love simmering through the cold. 26. Meat and potato patties. Long before fast food burgers, there were meat and potato patties. A working man's meal shaped by hand, cooked in sizzling pans and packed into lunch boxes, wrapped in wax paper. Made from leftover mashed potatoes and ground beef, they turned yesterday's scraps into today's comfort. The patties crisped at the edges, soft inside, perfectly golden. Kids dipped them in ketchup while parents paired them with gravy or eggs. Simple, yes, but behind that simplicity was the spirit of the Great Depression. Waste nothing, share everything, and feed whoever showed up hungry. When convenience foods came along, this handmade ritual vanished. Yet the taste still lives in memory, a little crispy, a little creamy, and completely honest. It's the flavor of hard work and ingenuity, a reminder that good food doesn't come from luxury, but from love and clever hands. 27. Tamale pie. In the sun-baked Southwest, tamale pie brought Mexican and native traditions together in one bubbling dish. Layers of seasoned ground beef, cornmeal, batter, tomatoes, and chili, baked until the top turned golden and fragrant. It was the taste of two cultures mingling, native corn meeting Spanish spice. This was frontier comfort food born from resourcefulness and community. Families cooked it in cast iron skillets, passing recipes by word of mouth. Every bite told a story of adaptation, of people making do with what the land offered and transforming hardship into something beautiful. Though frozen dinners replaced it by the 1980s, tamale pie endures wherever home cooks, still seasoned by instinct and baked with patience. It remains a warm echo of America's blended heritage, a little spicy, a little sweet, and entirely soulful. 28. Fried green tomatoes in the Dust Bowl years. When crops failed and the land cracked under drought, green tomatoes were salvation. Picked before ripening, they were dredged in cornmeal, fried in bacon grease, and served crisp and golden. Each slice held the story of making do when little else would grow. The sizzle in the pan was a sound of hope. Families who'd lost so much still found joy in that sharp, tangy bite, the taste of resilience and grit. It was farm food turned into memory proof that creativity could survive even in dust and hunger. Today, fried green tomatoes are a Southern delicacy, but their roots lie in survival. One bite and you can almost feel the sun-baked soil beneath your feet and the quiet strength of those who refuse to give up. 29. Honey glazed roasted carrots. Few dishes capture the heart of harvest like honey glazed roasted carrots. Pulled straight from the ground, washed in cold water, then brushed with honey and butter, they shimmered like gold under the oven light. Their sweetness was nature's own dessert. In the 1940s and 70s alike, this side dish brought color to gray winters and gratitude to humble tables. It represented the perfect balance between earth and hand, the farmer and the cook. The slow roasting, coaxed out caramel notes, turning simple roots into luxury. When prepackaged vegetables appeared, the ritual of roasting faded. But for those who remember scraping honey from the pan and tasting the earth's sweetness, it's clear the simplest food often tells the richest story. 30. Lemon chicken piccata. The final dish sings with brightness, lemon chicken piccata, a melody of citrus, butter, and briny capers. In the 1970s, it was the height of elegance for home cooks trying something new, yet its roots reached back to Italian and Mediterranean traditions that had long embraced balance and restraint. Thinly pounded chicken breasts, sizzled in butter, then bathed in lemon juice until tender. The sauce glistened like sunlight cutting through the richness with sharp, hopeful clarity. For many, it was their first taste of something fancy, yet deeply comforting. Over time, bottled sauces dulled its charm, but nothing replaces the sound of a pan sizzling with fresh lemon and garlic. It's the perfect closing note to a forgotten era, a reminder that America's food history isn't just about survival. It's about joy creation and the courage to savor something beautiful. Food has always been more than what we put on the table. It's the story of who we were, the work, the faith, and the love that shaped every bite. These 30 forgotten dinners from the 1970s weren't gourmet, they were honest. They carried the scent of hard labor, the warmth of family, and the quiet pride of making do. From corn pudding and wild rice casseroles to tamale pie and fried green tomatoes, each dish whispered the same truth. America's heart was built in its kitchens. Somewhere between convenience and speed, we lost that connection. But memory has a flavor, and once you taste it again, it never leaves you. Maybe tonight when you cook something from scratch, you'll hear the echo of a past that still belongs to us all. Because the real recipe of America isn't written in cookbooks, it's written in the lives of those who stirred, shared, and savored together. If this journey warmed your heart or stirred an old memory, let us know below. Your stories keep history alive. And if you want more tales from the kitchens that build a nation like, subscribe and join us next time where every meal tells another story.